My mother thinks I'm dead. Not metaphorically. Not dead to her. I mean, there is a headstone in a cemetery 40 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio, with my full name carved into the granite, Ethan Michael Carter, and a date of death that doesn't exist anywhere in my actual life. And every single Sunday, for the last 19 years, my mother has driven there alone, knelt down in the grass, and talked to me like I can hear her. I found out 3 weeks ago, and what I learned about who was actually buried under my name nearly destroyed what was left of my family. If you've ever found out that someone you loved had been lying to you since before you could remember, stay until the end. Because this isn't a ghost story. It's worse. It's true. Before we go further, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what my mother told me in that cemetery is the kind of secret that changes who you think you are. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 25 years old. I work in logistics for a freight company in Dayton. I have a one-bedroom apartment, a dog named Biscuit, and a mother who calls me every Sunday night at exactly 8 p.m., without fail. For 25 years, I thought I knew the shape of my own life. Ordinary childhood. Ordinary mother. One photograph on the mantle of a baby who didn't make it my brother, she always said. Lost before I was born. I was wrong about almost all of it. This is the story of how I followed my mother on a Sunday afternoon, found a grave with my name on it, and uncovered a decision she made when I was 11 months old. A decision that was supposed to stay buried forever. Like and comment below if you've ever discovered a secret your family kept to protect you. I read every single one. Now let's go back to the Sunday it started. It started with a flat tire. My mother, Diane, is 61. She still drives herself everywhere, still refuses help carrying groceries, still insists she's not old yet. So when her neighbor called me on a Sunday morning to say her car wouldn't start, I drove the 40 minutes to her house without thinking twice. I figured I'd jump the battery, maybe take her to lunch. Normal son things. But when I got there, she was standing in the driveway in a coat and scarf, holding a small bouquet of white carnations, looking at her dead car like it had personally betrayed her. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Nowhere," she said too fast. "Just an errand." My mother has never once in my life been a good liar. Her voice goes up half an octave, and she starts touching her earring. She was doing both. "Mom, it's 9 in the morning. What errand needs flowers?" She didn't answer. She just got into my car when I offered her a ride, gave me an address that wasn't a store or a friend's house, and stared out the window the entire drive like she was bracing for something. The address was Maple Ridge Cemetery. I remember laughing, actually laughing, because I assumed she was visiting my grandfather. Innocent. Routine. Sunday tradition. She wasn't. She got out of the car alone, told me to wait, and walked toward a section of the cemetery I'd never been to in my life. I watched her kneel down in front of a small gray headstone, set the carnations against it, and begin to talk quietly, like she always does at church, lips barely moving. I waited 15 minutes. Then curiosity beat patience, the way it always does, and I got out and walked over. And that's when I saw it. The name on the stone, Ethan Michael Carter. Born March 4th. Died February 19th, the following year. My name, my birthday, and a death date that placed me dying at 11 months old. I stood there in the cold for what felt like an hour, but was probably 10 seconds, reading my own name on a grave, while my living, breathing body stood 3 feet behind my mother's back. She turned around, saw my face, and the color drained out of hers completely. "Ethan," she started. "Who is that?" I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "Mom, who is buried in my grave?" She wouldn't answer me in the cemetery. She kept saying, "Not here, not like this," grabbing my arm, trying to walk me back to the car like I was 8 years old and about to have a meltdown in public. I let her, because honestly, I think I was the one about to have the meltdown. We sat in my car in the cemetery parking lot for almost 40 minutes before she said a single useful word. I didn't start the engine. I didn't turn on the radio. I just waited, because for the first time in my life, I understood that my mother was actually afraid of me. Finally, she said, "You had a twin brother." I want to be honest with you in that moment. My brain tried to make it simple, tried to make it a sad, ordinary story. A twin who died in infancy. A grieving mother who never talked about it. Tragic, but explainable. "Okay," I said carefully. "So that's him. That's his grave." "No," she said, and her voice cracked in a way I genuinely never heard before. "That's not his grave, Ethan. That's your grave. You're the one who died." I laughed. I actually laughed, because the sentence made no sense coming out of a living person's mouth, pointed at another living person. "Mom, I'm right here." "I know," she whispered. "But the boy buried in that grave, his name was Caleb. He was your twin. And when he died at 11 months old, your father and I made a decision. We told the world that Ethan died, and we let Caleb's name disappear instead." I stared at her. "Why would you do that?" And this is the part where I want you to understand something about my mother. She is not a cruel woman. She is not a liar by nature. Whatever she did believing it was the only door left open. "Because of your father," she said. "Because of what he was capable of. And because of what he'd already done to one of you." That sentence sat in the car with us like a third passenger. "What do you mean?" "What he'd already done." She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the row of headstones, and I watched her decide, in real time, whether 25 years of silence was worth protecting anymore. "Your father shook Caleb," she finally said. "Once. During a night when both of you wouldn't stop crying, and he hadn't slept in 3 days. I didn't see it happen. I only saw what happened after Caleb stopped breathing right, and by the time the ambulance came, it was already..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "The hospital report said sudden infant death," she continued. "No one questioned it. No one looked twice at a man holding his dead son and sobbing. But I knew. I knew the second I saw your father's face that it wasn't natural causes. So you switched our names," I said slowly, piecing it together. "You buried Caleb under my name, and you let me grow up as the survivor, except using a different version of myself. I switched your names because I was terrified," she said. "Terrified that if anyone, a doctor, a relative, a court, ever looked closely at what happened to Caleb, your father would lose visitation, lose the right to see you, and I'd lose everything trying to fight him for it. So I made the version of you that died the version no one would ever investigate. I buried the wrong name, and I kept the right son alive under a story nobody would question. I sat there absorbing the fact that for 25 years, I had been living under my dead brother's identity while my actual birth name was etched onto a headstone in a cemetery I'd never visited. "Does Dad know I know now?" I asked. Her face went white in a completely different way. "Your father doesn't know you exist," she said. "Not as the version of you sitting in this car. He thinks Ethan died. He has thought that for 25 years. And the man you call your stepfather, the man who raised you, he's the only one who ever knew the truth." I need you to understand what that sentence did to me, because it didn't just rearrange my past, it rearranged every memory I had of the man I called Dad. Robert Carter, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who sat through 11 years of mediocre Little League games, who walked me through my mother's hospital stays and my own breakup at 22 without ever once raising his voice. He wasn't my biological father. He never had been. And he had known, this entire time, that the boy he was raising was legally, medically, and bureaucratically a dead child wearing a living child's stolen identity. "Does he know everything?" I asked her. "About Caleb. About what actually happened. He's known since the week he met me," she said. "I told him before we got serious, because I needed someone who could carry that weight with me. He never treated you differently because of it. If anything, he loved you harder because of what it cost to protect you." I drove home in silence that day. I didn't speak to my mother for 4 days afterward, not out of anger, exactly, but because I genuinely didn't know which version of my own life to hold on to. On the 5th day, I drove to my stepfather's house without calling first. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "She told you." Not a question. A confirmation. Like he'd been waiting 25 years for this exact conversation to finally happen. We sat on his back porch for 2 hours. He told me things my mother hadn't, things she maybe couldn't bring herself to say out loud. He told me that my biological father, the man whose last name I legally still carry, had tried to find Caleb twice over the years, once when I was 9, once when I was 16, hiring a man to track down records of a son he believed had survived and been hidden from him during a messy, unofficial separation. "Your mother panicked both times," Robert said. "We almost moved out of state the second time. He never found anything, because legally, there was nothing to find. The boy he was looking for had a death certificate. The boy who actually existed had a different name in every system that mattered. So he's still out there," I said, thinking his son might still be alive somewhere. "He's still out there," Robert confirmed. "And 2 months ago, your mother got a letter." I felt my stomach drop before he even said the next part. "From him?" "From his lawyer," Robert said quietly. "He's sick, Ethan. Dying, from what we understand. And apparently, in whatever's left of his conscience, he wants to find his son before it's too late. Not to hurt anyone, just to know if the boy he hurt that night actually lived. And Mom's been visiting the grave every Sunday since," I said, understanding hitting me like cold water. "Not just to grieve Caleb, but because she's terrified that if she stops, somehow it becomes real that I exist instead of him. Like visiting the grave is the only thing keeping the lie believable." Robert didn't answer that. He didn't have to. The look on his face told me I was right. I asked my mother to show me the letter 3 days later. She resisted for almost an hour before finally pulling it from a locked drawer in her bedroom. The same drawer, I realized, where she'd probably kept this secret physically contained for 2 decades. The letter was short, formal, written by a lawyer on behalf of a man named Gerald Whitfield, not Carter. My mother had remarried and changed both our last names, years before I could remember any different. The letter said Gerald had stage 4 pancreatic cancer, that he had no other children, no other family beyond a sister in Toledo, that he understood he had made mistakes as a young father and was not seeking custody, money, or any legal claim, only the chance, before he died, to know whether the son he believed he'd lost had truly died, or whether the family had simply disappeared to protect him from a man he no longer recognized as himself. I read that letter 4 times. And here is the part I wasn't prepared for, somewhere underneath 25 years of constructed identity, underneath a dead brother's name and a stepfather's quiet sacrifice. I felt something I didn't expect to feel for a man who had hurt an infant version of my own family. I felt curiosity. And beneath that, something smaller and more uncomfortable, a flicker of compassion for a dying stranger who happened to share half my DNA. "What are you going to do?" I asked my mother. "I don't know," she said honestly, for maybe the first time in this entire conversation. "I've spent 25 years making sure he never found you. Now you're a grown man, and the decision isn't only mine to make anymore." I sat with that for nearly 2 weeks before I made a decision of my own. I wrote back. Not to reunite, not to forgive. Exactly, I'm still not sure forgiveness is the right word for what happened to a brother I never got to know. But I wrote back because I realized that if I didn't, my mother would keep visiting that grave every Sunday for the rest of her life, performing grief for a version of events that was never fully resolved. I told Gerald, through his lawyer, that the son he was looking for had lived, that I was the proof of it, and that I was willing to meet him once, not for him, and honestly not entirely for me, but for the 11-month-old boy buried under my name, who deserved to have his real story acknowledged by both parents who'd survived him. We met 4 weeks later, in a hospice room that smelled like antiseptic and wilted flowers. He was smaller than I expected, sicker than I expected. He cried when I walked in, not dramatically, just quietly, the way people cry when relief and guilt arrive in the same breath. "You look like him," he said, "like Caleb did, in the one photo I kept." "I'm not him," I said. "I'm Ethan, the one who lived." He nodded slowly, like that distinction mattered more to him than anything else I could have said. We talked for almost an hour. He apologized in the broken, incomplete way that dying men apologize not enough, never enough, but more than the silence my mother had carried alone for 25 years. I didn't forgive him out loud. I'm still not sure I have, fully. But I let him hold my hand for a moment before I left, and I think that was its own kind of answer. He passed away 19 days later. My mother went to his funeral, stood in the back, said nothing to anyone. I went with her, not for him, but for her because some griefs are too tangled to carry alone, even decades later. Last Sunday, I went with my mother to Maple Ridge Cemetery for the first time as myself, not as a secret, not as a stand-in, but as Ethan, the brother of the boy buried there. We knelt together in front of that small gray headstone, with my name carved into it. And for the first time, my mother spoke to the grave out loud, in front of me, instead of in the hushed, private voice she'd used for 19 years. "I'm sorry it took so long to tell him your name," she said to the stone. "His name, Caleb." We're talking about replacing the headstone, giving my brother his real name back, finally, after 25 years of borrowing mine to stay hidden from a father who hurt him. I still visit some Sundays, not out of guilt anymore, out of something closer to honoring a brother I never got to meet, who quietly carried my identity so that I could survive a man neither of us chose. My mother still goes every week, but now, when she kneels in the grass, she's not protecting a lie anymore. She's just grieving a son, the right one, by the right name. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments what would you have done in my mother's place. Would you have told the truth sooner, or protected the people you love the way she did, for as long as she could? We post a new true story every week, right here, on The Silent Witness. If you want more stories like this one, secrets, survival, and the families who carry both, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next story.